experience and are here to share some aspects of this Murāqaba practice. So thank you again for coming to the East Coast again and being with us, Brother Baraka, and we hope you have a very meaningful experience today. Thank you so much.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Wassalatu wassalam ala ashraf al-anbiya wa sayyid al-mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Rabbi ashrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina Muhammadin مفتاح باب رحمة الله عدد ما في علم الله صلاة وسلاما دائمين بدوام ملك الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. I greet you all with the greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thanking our dear brother Omar and his wife Amira for hosting and inviting us here to New Jersey as well as New York City. And of course, thanking this blessed and beautiful space and its stewards, our dear friends who welcomed us here for the launch of my poetry book a year and a half ago or something, and now we are very happy to be back to this space. It wouldn't be right to come to this region without visiting again, if only just to look at the bookshelves. We could just stop now and peruse these books. I've never seen a better collection of books at any bookstore in North America, so alhamdulillah. And our intention, as our brother Omar mentioned, is to reflect on Murāqaba. To do so, I wanted to just open with some poetry. And of course, the organization that we are part of is called Rumi Center for Spirituality and the Arts, and Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi is one of the great masters beloved in the East and the West. And one of the things about him is that he made an insight that when he was about 37 years old, that actually poetry, in particular and art in general, is a means not only of expressing beauty, but actually of self-discovery and self-transformation. And it was through that he then devoted the rest of his life to guiding people to self-realization and self-transformation through the arts. So we wanted to just begin with some poetry. And this poem is called What You Seek is Seeking You, which is a line of Rumi's poetry inspired by him. What you seek is seeking you. And what you speak into existence. In a realm you'll soon awaken from this dream into. When the being of light descends and says, it's now my time to meet with you, and opens up the body's cage and lets the spirit free in you. The mystery is deep in you. If you yourself could peek in through the veil of you that isn't you, but that you've come to think is you. The one who poured before is pouring more. Is there a leak in you? You're thirsty as the desert for the rain, but there's a spring in you. Oasis in the placeless. Come inside and have a drink or two. This is no mirage. The mirage is what you think is true. All is a mirage except the face that always speaks to you through every single tongue. All praise the one who is uniquely true. Rays of the feathered sun point to the one who casts its heat in you, and all the mirrored forms reflect the light. Look how it beams in you. Who receives this breath of life, and who is it that breathes in you? The path of letting go of you is the only path that leads to you. that paradisal tree whose leaves eternally are deep in bloom. The secret of all secrets is you hold its very seeds in you. The treasure that was loving to be known has hid its keys in you. Is not the chest that holds its jewels, the chest that you are breathing through. So mount the back of the Baraka and grab its reins, noble steeds in you. You think yourself a single drop of rain, and yet the seas in you. Give yourself completely now. Don't wait until he seizes you. You think yourself a creature made of clay, and yet he sees in you. The ear through which he hears, the very hand with which he sees is through. Maramaiti, the Ramait. It wasn't you, but it was we who threw. What you seek before a you to seek, it was seeking you. And the only thing that's keeping you from oneness is you're seeing too. Alhamdulillah. Thank you. May we be those who see one. Say one, see one, know one, be one. The foundational teaching of the path is La ilaha illallah. No God but God. It's 4 words, and it's like koan-esque, in that it has many layers of meaning that one must realize. And they say about La ilaha illallah that it is the first step and the last step. It is the outermost out and the innermost in. It is the first step when one takes the path to realize that there are no other deities and no idols have power, but it is also the last stage of realization that the prophets and the saints and the great ones realize when they have their great opening into the divine presence. All of them realize La ilaha illallah to different degrees, and people only differ in their realization of it. Alhamdulillah. So that poem was just to open up, and I wanted to recite a poem from Maulana Rumi. It would only be, I have to recite my own poetry before his, never after, because I'm the opening act and he's the headliner. It wouldn't be good adab to recite mine after his. But these few lines, I think, get deeply into what Murāqaba is all about, because they also get into the nature of the self, which is really important as a framework to understand what these contemplative, meditative practices are all about. And so Rumi will give us this beautiful analogy of the ruby and the stone. A stone which has become a ruby is filled with the qualities of the sun. No stoniness remains in it. If it loves itself, it is loving the sun. And if it loves the sun, it is loving itself. There is no difference between these 2 loves. Before the stone becomes a ruby, it is its own enemy. Not one, but 2 exist. The stone is dark and blind to daylight. If it loves itself, it is unfaithful. It intensely resists the sun. If it says I, it is all darkness. A pharaoh claims divinity and is brought down. Hallaj says the same and is saved. One eye is cursed. Another eye is blessed. One eye is a stone, another a crystal. One an enemy of the light, the other a reflector of it. In its inmost consciousness, it is one with the light. work on your stony qualities and become resplendent like the ruby. Practice self-denial and accept difficulty. Always see infinite life in letting the lower self die. Your stoniness will decrease and your ruby nature will grow. The signs of that lower self-existence will leave your body and ecstasy will take you over. Dig a well in the earth of this body, or even before the well is dug, let God draw the water up. Be always at work scraping the dirt from the well. To anyone who struggles, perseverance brings good fortune. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, has said that each prostration of prayer is a knock on heaven's door. When anyone continues to knock, felicity eventually shows its smiling face. This is from Book 5 of the Masnavi, and this is translated by our dear friend Kabir Helminski, who also I know is a friend of SufiCorner and has recently been here. So Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi is giving us this beautiful analogy and telling us about ourselves, which is that we have a ruby nature and we have a stony nature. And what is the difference between a ruby and a stone that you might step on in the street and not think twice of? What is the differentiation between a ruby or another precious gem and a everyday stone on the street? Anybody? It forms under pressure. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Why do we value rubies or other precious stones other than everyday stones that we see in the street? Rarity. What qualities are inherent in them that make them light? And I think this point about light is really interesting because the stone itself is not the generator of light. It's not the cause of light. But it is what? Translucent. It is the reflector of light. And he says very beautifully that if you hold the ruby up to the sun, not only can you see the sun, but you see the light of the sun reflected in all directions. If you hold an average stone that you pick up from the street up, it intensely resists the sun. It blocks the sun. And so Rumi is saying that all of us have a ruby nature, but we also have a stony nature. The ruby nature is our true nature. It is the spirit. It is the ruh. It is that part of us which is our essential self and is created to reflect the names and attributes of the ultimate reality, of the source, of the supreme. But most of us aren't always in that dimension of ourself. We find ourselves dealing with various degrees of stoniness. A part of us which feels separate, which intensely resists the sun. And Maulana Rumi very beautifully says, see infinite life in letting this self die. Right? And sometimes the Sufis, that they say die before you die, and they talk about fighting the self and the greater struggle, and it can seem like it's about waging war on the self. But this is somewhat hyperbolic. What it really means is a type of self-purification. It means transcending that part of ourselves which resists the sun and allowing ourselves to become more perfect in our reflectivity of that light. So this is what Maulana is getting at, and he uses a very beautiful analogy. He says one eye is blessed and another is cursed. And he says Fir'aun said that he claimed divinity and is brought down, and Hallaj said the same and is saved. So this takes a bit of commentary. When Surah Al-Hallaj who knows the story of Mansur al-Hallaj? Anyone who's steeped in early Sufi lore will know. He's a famous martyr of love. And he was very famous for saying things which outwardly upset the religious authorities. He was a contemporary of Junaid al-Baghdadi, who was the master of the early Sufis. They call him the Imam of the Qawm, of the folk, of the people of the path. And Junaid knew that there are those who, because of their dominance maybe by some stony qualities, they're not ready for the inner teachings yet. And that's okay. We all have levels of development, and we come into realization at different times and different points. And so when he would speak about the secrets of the path, he was known that he would actually make sure he knew everyone with him, and he would lock the door and he would put the key under his thigh, as if to say, this is not for everyone, this type of knowledge. And even actually at a certain point, it can be harmful for certain people to hear this because they're going to reject it out of their ignorance. And Hallaj really didn't take that approach. Hallaj went in the marketplace and proclaimed the truth, and his famous saying is, Ana al-Haq, I am the reality. Al-Haq being one of the names, the divine names. And so, of course, to the esoteric minded who didn't have the inner awakening, this was a blasphemous statement. Are you claiming to be divine? Are you claiming to be God, right? And so famously, Hallaj was put to death. And he was actually given the opportunity to recant and take back these statements, but he said, do whatever you want. And they say that Junaid didn't come to his defense in the trial, as if to say, I can't help you. This is what you get for sharing our secrets. If I came to your defense, they would come after me too. So you're on your own. So Mansur al-Hallaj became the early martyr of love, and the later Sufi tradition, Maulana Rumi, as well as all the great Sufi masters, would defend Hallaj and just say that he was misunderstood by those who didn't have this inner sight, because what he was speaking from was not the self, but actually the absence of self. It was the light that was reflecting in him. As Rumi said, when the ruby loves the light of the sun, it is loving the light of itself. And when it loves the light of itself, it is loving the light of the sun, because it is one light. It's pure reflectivity. It's actually the absence of self that he was speaking from. On the other hand, Fir'aun, the great archetype of the lower self in the Quran, of the ego self, his famous statement was, Ana Rabbukum al-A'la, I am your Lord Most High. And that's how he fell. Because he was saying it from his arrogance, from his ego self, from his pride, from his looking down on others, from his rejecting the truth. And that's very different. And so Rumi is calling us to strive on this spiritual path and this spiritual practice, not simply just to conform to outward disciplines, but ultimately so that we take it on as the polishing of the self. Because it's not that some people are stones and some people are rubies. It's that everyone has the potential to be a ruby. But there are layers of stone we have to work through. And so may we uncover our ruby nature, inshallah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that everything has a polish, and the polish of the heart is remembrance of Allah, dhikr Allah. This invocation or this remembrance is really a pillar of the path. And everything in our tradition is to really bring us into that state. And unfortunately, often the way that religion is taught amongst Muslims, but not exclusively amongst Muslims, is simply do the outer things. And there's a neglect of the understanding of even why. But far from just being transaction, right? you do this, you get that. This is a superficial reading of what this is all about, because the Prophet ﷺ was actually calling us into a transformation, that this path is about transformation. In the hadith, there are many hadith, but one will suffice, in which the divine voice says that my servant draws near to me by nothing more beloved to me than what I have made obligatory, and then continues to draw near by extra acts of devotion until I love him or her. And when I love them, I become the seeing with which they see, the hearing with which they hear, the hand with which they grasp, and the foot with which they walk. This is more mystical than what Halaj said. And the Prophet ﷺ said it, and it's recorded in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim for those who want the dalil. So the purpose here of all of the prayer and all of the fasting and all the commands and all of the prohibitions that we were gifted is simply that we would approach and awaken to the fullness of the divine love. So may we be those who awaken to that. Ameen. So as for the practice of Murāqaba, Murāqaba shares the root with one of the divine names. Allah's name is Ar-Raqib. Ar-Raqib means the one who observes, the one who witnesses, the one who sees. And in a certain sense, Murāqaba then becomes that bringing our observation or bringing our awareness to meet the divine awareness and the divine observation. It is understanding that فَأَيْنَمَا تَوَلُّوا فَثَمَّ وَجْهَ اللَّهِ, wheresoever you turn, there is the face of God, and هُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ, He is with you wheresoever you are, and He is closer to us in our jugular vein. And this divine immanence, this divine nearness, that as the Sufis will often mention, that there is a door within our heart that opens into the divine presence. And that even though we are here in the realm of multiplicity, there is unity that underlies all of it. And there is a certain sense in which that unity is still pervading everything and is creating and annihilating everything in every instant, but we're not able to necessarily perceive that. And so it's about cultivating the awareness that behind everything there is one actor, there is one source, there is one supreme. And this is really what Murāqaba is about. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, when he was asked what is ihsan, ihsan in a dictionary would mean goodness and beauty and excellence. But he didn't give a dictionary definition, he gave a metaphysical definition of ihsan. And in other words, he said he got to the root of what is the metaphysical root of goodness and beauty and excellence. When he said that ihsan is to worship Allah or devote yourself to Allah as if you are seeing Him, and if you are not seeing Him, He is seeing you. And ta'bud Allah ka'annaka tarah, fa'in lam takun tarah, innahu yarak. And so, in a certain sense, Murāqaba is to bring that awareness and that consciousness of the divine presence that is always there, to become present with it. This is really what Murāqaba is about. So, inshallah, we are going to together engage in a little bit of dhikr, and then we will get into the Murāqaba practice, and I'll guide us through it so that we can deepen into it. So everyone, inshallah, just get comfortable. And the dhikr we'll do collectively, and it will be a simple dhikr that First we'll begin with the Fatiha, and then we'll do 111 times the Bismillah. Bismillah. I invite everyone to say it collectively with us and to bring your heart to attention, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الرحمن الرحيم. مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. آمين. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim means in the name of Allah, the Supreme, the Compassionate, the Merciful, the One who is infinite love. And each time the dervish whirls in the sama, you see one hand is to the heavens and one hand is to the earth. And each whirl is a prayer, an invocation to be a pure vessel, a pure channel through which the divine compassion and love and mercy and light is flowing to all beings. Rumi's reed analogy, to be like a reed flute through which the divine breath is blown. And so we intend by this invocation that we let go of anything in ourselves which is blocking us or veiling us from that divine compassion and divine mercy and divine light, and that it pours through us to all beings, inshallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. 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 Bismillahir Rahmanir بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم 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 بسم الله الرحمن Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. 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 Body, bring your attention to your heart, the center of your chest, and take a few slow, deep breaths. And visualize that with each breath you're receiving, you're taking in light from the divine light and nur. So take in the breath as deep as you can. And as you exhale, visualize that you're letting go of anything in your heart that has been resistant to this light, or has been forgetful of this light, or that has blocked this light. His magnum opus, the Masnavi, telling us that each one of us is like a reed flute that has been separated from the riverbed in which we originated. And we've been carved into and we've been given breath. This breath brings us back to life. but we're in the realm of separation, and we intuit and we feel deeply within our beings that we are from a riverbed of unity and of peace and of presence. And he invites us to empty ourselves of anything that is filling us and stopping up our instrument from receiving the divine breath and the divine light. And he says that this yearning for return, this nostalgia for our origin, is actually necessary for us to take the path. Because until we feel that intense yearning and burning and love for our source, for our origin, we will remain fragmented and pulled into the realm of multiplicity. And he's commenting on the Quranic teaching that each one of us was a spirit before we entered in this world in the divine presence, in a realm of perfect peace and knowledge and witnessing our source, our creator. Making tawaf around the throne of Allah, circumambulating like the pilgrims around the Kaaba. And that each of us was addressed by the divine voice when we were asked, Alastu bi rabbikum? Am I not your creator, your cherisher, your sustainer, the one who will take you through every stage, and the one who will return you to me? And each human spirit that was, that is, and that ever will be on that plane affirmed when we said, Bala shahidna, yes, we witness. And this Bala means yes, but it also means affliction. We accepted the tribulation of separation. We accepted to leave the realm of unity for the realm of multiplicity, to leave the realm of witnessing for the realm of separation, trusting that there was a divine wisdom for our souls in entering into this experience of separation. For the Sufis, this divine address and this divine witnessing is not only temporal, it's not just something that happened before now, but it's ontological, meaning it's happening in every moment in the highest realm of being. Each one of us, in a certain sense, has never left that presence. But we have fallen asleep to that awareness. And our beloved Prophet told us that people are sleeping, and when they die, they wake up. He also said, die before you die. Wake up before you wake up. And the metaphor of the dream is so profound because each moment, each night when we fall asleep, we enter into a realm of experiences, joy, pleasure and pain, confusion, experiences with different people and relationships. We experience everything through our senses in that dream, and very soon we forget about the place that we fell asleep. But the sleeper never leaves the place that they fell asleep. And so even now, our spirit is in the divine presence. It is in the garden, it is witnessing the real. Manana Rumi says that just because your eyes are closed, the sun does not stop shining. Just because you can't see the sun's rays doesn't mean that it's not shining. And just as a thin veil of skin covers our eyes when they're closed, a thin veil covers our heart's eye from perceiving the divine reality. And so Murāqaba is really opening the eye of the heart and bringing our attention to the Divine One who is like your beloved, who is watching you sleep, and closer to us than even that. So bring your attention to the heart, to which Allah said, I do not look at your outer forms, but I look at your heart. And open the doors and the windows of your heart to receive the divine gaze and the divine light and the divine names and attributes. And let go of anything that resists, to be purified and transformed by them. Maintain your focus. Feel that your heart, with every beat, is beating the divine name. Allah. 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 And hear that beat silently within yourself. If ever you find your mind wander, just bring your attention from your mind to your heart. This is heartfulness, bringing our presence to the one who is always and eternally present in our heart. Task is not to seek for love, but to seek the barriers that we have built to love. So allowing the heart to truly surrender, to truly prostrate, and let go of all resistance to the healing the divine love and the divine light. We don't have to be perfect to receive this light. All receive this light who will accept this light and surrender to this light. Here to bring our presence to that sacred presence that is always with us. And if we do not feel that presence, and it's hard to open the door to that presence that is in our heart, then what we can do is knock. Because ultimately it's not us that opens the door. Maulana Rumi says that every time that we say Allah, Allah in our heart, it is a knock. So just see that every time you silently invoke the divine name, you are knocking. To everyone who continues knocking, felicity shows its smiling face. verse of the Quran that is inscribed on the Rumi's tomb. Inna awliya Allah la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun. Indeed, the friends of God, no fear is upon them, nor do they grieve. This wilaya, friendship, intimacy with God is the goal. And if we pay attention to this verse, khawf, fear, is for the future. We fear what will be, what won't be, what might happen, what won't happen. And grief is for the past, what we lost, what we wished would have happened. And so the awliya, the friends of God, the intimates of God, the saints of God, they become free of the past and the future. They are those who have attained presence with the divine presence. And in reality, the only way to Allah is in the present. It's not in the past or the future. And when we let go of our hopes and our fears and our grief for the fleeting and perishing dream realm and direct our attention to the transcendent and absolute, the real, the source, we step into that presence. And Allah is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim At-Tawwab, the one who loves when we turn back, who is a sabur, the patient. So no matter how many moments we turn away, Allah is waiting patiently for us to turn back, never turning that divine presence away from us, but waiting for the moment that we turn our presence to meet. close this Murāqaba with these words of Maulana Rumi. Don't go away. Come near. Don't be faithless. Be faithful. Find the antidote within the venom. Come to the root of yourself. Molded of clay, yet kneaded from the substance of certainty. A guard at the treasury of holy light. Come, return to the root of yourself. Once you get a hold of selflessness, you'll be dragged away from your ego and freed from many traps. Come, return to the root of yourself. You were born from the children of God's creation, but you have fixed your sight too low. How can you be happy? Come, return to the root of yourself. Although you are a talisman protecting a treasure, you are also the mind. Open your hidden eyes and come to the root of yourself. You were born from a ray of God's majesty and have the blessings of a good star. Why suffer at the hands of things that don't exist? Come, return to the root of yourself. You are a ruby embedded in granite. How long will you pretend it isn't true? We can see it within your eyes. Come to the root of yourself. You came here from the presence of that fine friend, a little drunk but gentle, stealing our hearts with that look so full of fire. So come, return to the root of yourself. Our master and host Shamsi Tabrizi has put the eternal cup before you. Glory be to God. What a rare wine. So come, return to the root of yourself. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and slowly, while keeping your awareness and your presence in your heart, also bring your presence into this room. So, Murāqaba is one of the contemplative or meditative practices in the Sufi tradition. And the beauty of it is that we can start wherever we are. And the goal, of course, is not that we have a practice of this every day and then we go about our lives heedlessly, but that even a 5-minute daily practice of this, or 10 minutes, can help feed into the rest of our lives and we become people of presence. And we can move into this space of devoting ourselves to Allah as if we are witnessing Allah. And if we are not witnessing Allah, then at least navigating the world in a way that indicates we are aware that Allah is witnessing us. This is lucid dreaming, being awake in the dream. So I wanted to just open up the floor if anyone had any questions, comments, reflection, anything that came up. So our sister Nadia mentioned about tadabbur, which is also a kind of contemplative or deep reading or deep awareness and presence. These are all, I would say, forms of fikr or contemplation. There's dhikr and fikr. Dhikr is the invocation, the remembrance, where we're doing the chanting and the invocation of the divine name. Fikr is related to contemplation or reflection. And all of these practices these are complementary practices, but the point is to develop a kind of interiority and a stillness and a presence. And a good analogy that we can think of is that if you go into a stream or go into a lake and you can see through, and you can see through the water and you can see the kind of whatever is there, but if you were to kick up the sediment, then it becomes murky. And our self is also like this. And the things that we take in through our senses, as well as our own fleeting kind of ego self and its pulls and what it wants and what it feels and what it fears and these kind of things, they stir up so that it becomes cloudy for us. But so these practices really are to help slow us down and like settle all of it. So they're all complementary, and different, maybe Sufi orders will emphasize different ones, but they're all complementary. And I think they're like over-the-counter medicines too, so whatever works for you, take it. Anybody else have any thoughts, reflections, questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So, for Murāqaba, we tap into this space of the heart, but we still have the mind going places.
Yeah.
So how can we always connect or go back to that, heart space?
Beautiful.
Because when I feel like Murāqaba, you're also like aware of your thoughts.
Yeah.
So in that leads you to the spiral.
Beautiful. Beautiful question. You know, someone asked in our retreat about the difference between mindfulness, which is a very common term, and Murāqaba, and they have similarities, but mindfulness especially as it's been kind of adopted in the secular West is that it's like a skill, a bringing presence, of bringing attentiveness, of bringing stilling your mind and bringing focus and attention, which is useful, but it's also ambiguous. Like a criminal could have mindfulness in how they're plotting their next caper, or some world leader can have that, or some Fortune 500 CEO, and you see even mindfulness in the boardroom and things. It's a kind of devoid of the moral or the holistic spiritual content. Heartfulness can't be separated from that, because it's actually orienting ourselves to the ground of being, which is love itself. This is a really central teaching of the Sufis, is that it's a loving presence. And so it then, one who is in that state, heartfulness, you could say, as opposed to mindfulness, it is going to color every aspect of how we behave and how we engage with every being. Rumi has a really beautiful analogy, as he always does for everything. But he said there was a man who was running and he was chased by wasps. And as he was running, he started stripping out his clothing as he was being stung. And he threw himself into this lake and he went under. And they stopped stinging. But then he ran out of breath, so he had to put his head up. And they started stinging again. He got a breath and he went down. And he held it as long as he could have, but every time he went up, they would sting him. And he then comments on this analogy. He says these thoughts, or these wasps rather, are our thoughts. And our worries and our fears and our hopes, and especially those things which are attached to our ego selves, wants and fears, and do they like me, and what happens if they don't, and all this concerns of the lower self that our spirit doesn't have, and it stings us constantly, and we become so upset by this thing that happens to us or that thing. And so we're all being chased by these wasps. And so what does the water represent? Divine remembrance. Dhikr. When we come to rest in the presence, the thoughts start to subside. And at first, we can't stay underwater very long. So we have to come up. And then we get stung again. And he says, but eventually if you keep up, your lungs will develop their capacity and you can stay in the water of the divine presence and divine remembrance longer. It's very interesting. There's, in the Gulf, now the Emirates, they're very wealthy because of oil, but before oil they were pearl divers. And they developed the capacity where human lungs can actually develop the capacity to stay underwater upwards of 5 minutes, 10 minutes, right? Because they were basically diving unaided without modern technology to get these pearls. Their whole economy was based on that. So they developed this ability. Likewise, spiritually, we can develop the ability to remain in that presence. But it takes time. It's a practice. And then Rumi says, until you become water. There are those that actually become water. And Rumi calls them the fish. So he says, everyone but the fish becomes sated with some amount of water. So the sparrow just takes one sip. The camel takes a lot. And the elephant takes even more. But all of them reach their full, except the fish. The fish never leave the water. And those are the awliya, those are the saintly ones. Of course, the fish being a symbol of that, and we know the story of Khidr and Moses and the fish that goes in the sea. So, And he says all but the fish become satiated with water. So he's asking us to become like fish who become amphibious. We can breathe in the water. A remembrance. And so he says that those that become like this, even were they far from water, the wasps would flee from them. They've become water, as Bruce Lee talked about. Be like water, my friend. So this should give us, this should be an encouragement for those of us that feel like our spiritual lung capacity is still developing. It's okay. Wherever we are, that's where we start, and we can develop a practice. We had a week-long Murāqaba retreat, and some of the people here were there. And we all committed to doing just 5 minutes a day after that. Because if you set up 20 minutes or 30 minutes, some days you might fall off, but 5 minutes, okay, we can manage. And what we found is that if you start with 5, you often do 10 or 15. And once you get into it, it becomes easy. So we should think of our spiritual life as our practice, and that's a beautiful thing. And not become frustrated that we're not perfect, because this is the path. And we know that the Prophet told us that where there are people that never made a mistake and were spiritually perfect, Allah would do away with them and create people that would fall and turn back, fall and turn back. In a certain sense, this whole dance of existence is about that.
Trying to formulate words. Thank you.
Thank you.
When you experience the water and you become that expansive oneness, the only challenge that I feel arising now is that there is no mind, and then navigating in the world. And allowing the movement and actions and doing. It feels like there's a gap, like how to not reignite the identity to then move into the world. So it's like, I'm just curious for you, like obviously you have actions and things to be done, and it's like rather than the ego arising and choosing what needs to be done and formulating, it's like, how do you maintain when you go into the world? It feels like it naturally, the identity real arises when I'm around others, or the perception of others that don't share the same space.
Thank you. It's a beautiful question. And you know, they have a famous story that there was a monk on a mountaintop seclusion with his master, and he attained a very high level of realization. And then his master said, okay, now for your final lesson, go home and spend the holidays with your family. It's true that we can have these beautiful moments of openness and feel that our egos kind of let go and feel the light, feel the love, and it's so much easier when we're with blessed company like we are now. people whose spiritual states elevates ours and who reflect the light back to us. But it's not always like that. And not everyone that we meet is easy for us. But even that is part of the lesson. And of course we know that so much of Sufi tradition, this image of wine, of divine intoxication, which is the state of ecstasy that one feels when you let go of yourself and you feel this kind of transcend the mind. What is drunkenness in a certain sense is like transcending that self. Why do people like to get drunk? It's that you kind of get to let go of yourself for a few hours. And Rumi is very clear, everyone is drunk on something. Most people are drunk on the five senses is one of his statements. Because we become intoxicated with whatever we're focused on. But he's telling us to upgrade our intoxicants to the divine wine. But one of the of course, the heart is a cup, the wine is this ma'rifah or spiritual experience or opening, tasting. And the saki, the one who pours, is the divine or the spiritual master, spiritual guide, the prophet. And the tavern is the Khanaq or Zawi or Sufi gathering place. There's this tavern slang and symbolism. But one of the things that Rumi also mentioned, which is really important, he talks about the dregs, the bitter stuff at the bottom of the barrel. And he has a line where he says, I'm pouring the wine for all those who are coming to me. He's speaking about his disciples that he's leading to spiritual maturation and realization, and they're becoming intoxicated. But then he says, but as for me, I drink the dregs from the bottom of the barrel. So he, even though he was this advanced spiritual master, he was in a state of what we would say constriction, right? So there's, in the Sufis, they talk about expansive states and contractive states. Qabd and bast. And so the great ones, they also experience these states. And they turn into experience of the divine beauty and the divine majesty, right? The divine rigor, intensity. But then Rumi says, but this is what my beloved has poured for me, and so I love it. So he saw even that, and again the Sufis talk about the beloved, that's another one, the intimacy with the beloved, but they also talk about the koi beloved. You used to come to me and now you've gone away, where have you gone? This is also speaking about states of separation, states where your ego identity presents itself again, states where you feel distant, states where you feel a lack of presence. And we often think about the advanced spiritual masters as people that don't go through these states, but the states just become more refined. And in a certain sense, the deeper you go into union, the deeper that any loss of that is hard to bear, is almost unimaginable to bear. And anyone who's fallen in love knows that, right? It's so intense that when you're separated from the beloved, it's a type of pain that's almost unbearable. And the Sufis are, and one of my teachers, he said to me, spiritual states are like candy for babies. That they're helpful at a certain point, but also we worship the one who created states. We don't do it for the states. The expansion and contraction are both ways to know the divine, because he is the expander and the contractor. And there's the famous story of Majnun, Layla, Majnun, the lover of Layla, who And most of you know this is like Romeo and Juliet for the Muslim world. But Qais was his name, and he fell in love with Layla, and then she could not be married to him. Her father didn't approve, and so she was married off. And so he was heartbroken, but he said, I'm going to stay loyal to Layla in my heart. And he would walk around saying, Layla, Layla. And the Sufis took this and said, we should be like this. We should be loyal to Layla. So one story that they say is that Layla's family threw a banquet, and so Majnun, as he became known, which literally means crazed or mad, because he was so in love with Layla that he would kiss a wall in the town over and over again for hours. Said, what are you doing? He said, I once saw Layla touch this wall. He would follow this black dog around for hours. They said, what are you doing? He said, its hair reminds me of Layla's hair. They said, he's Majnun, he's crazy. He's lost his mind. He said, you don't see what I see in Layla. So one time he came, the whole village was invited to a banquet at Layla's home, thrown by Layla's family, and Layla was serving the meal. And it was like buffet style, but Layla was serving it. So he's in line, extremely excited, every step closer to Layla, waiting for his turn, holding his plate. He cannot contain his excitement. And finally, as he steps closer, it becomes his turn, and he hands his plate to Layla, and she takes the plate, she throws it against the wall, shatters the plate. And everyone looks like, oh. And he just screams for joy. And they say, see, he's Majnun. We always know. This is why he's Majnun. When he looked at them, he said, no, don't you see? Now I get to go back in line. In other words, most people ask from the divine, I want this, but very few want the divine. And the Sufi is the one who just wants to have adab with Allah. Good. Adab is so hard to translate. Manners, it's like manners, but it's like proper relationship to the divine in every state. Whatever thing we're put in. And of course the secret of that story is, why did Layla break his plate? She wanted him back in line. She wanted him too. And we sometimes get difficult experiences and we think, does this mean that Allah doesn't love me? Does this mean that I'm cut off? Does this mean I've fallen spiritually? And often our difficult experiences are actually the love, because they give us an opportunity to let go deeper and to reorient ourselves. And this is really, if you're irritated with every polish, or with every rub, how will you ever become polished? So, also the self is not our enemy, never exactly. It's like a beautiful wild horse. And you don't want to, when we talk about breaking the horse, it means training it. It doesn't mean breaking it. It's like what we say, break the ego, kill the ego. It doesn't mean that. It means training it. It means establishing a proper relationship with our nafs, with ourself, and training it so that it comes into submission to the higher spirit. And then it becomes a steed that will take us. This is the ideal of the Sufis. But I also am so happy with what you shared, because it's true. It's we all incline towards the beautiful, expansive, the light, and when we have a taste of it, it can become very disorienting to have to navigate the world and to see the way that our own ego can reappear. But that's also, I think, your insight is so profound. That's part of the beautiful dance of it. And may we find find ourselves with companions that can support us on the journey. Companionship is very important. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, said you are on the way of your friend, of your companion. And that doesn't mean we necessarily shun all people that are more spiritual than you, no. But it also means one of the secrets of that is that the people you spend time with, they're not just outside of you, they become part of you. And anyone who's had a parent or grandparent that maybe has passed away, but you still hear their voice, don't you, sometimes? I used to hear my mother's voice when I was a teenager, rebelling, before I found a cause, just a rebel without a cause. And my friends and I gonna get into trouble, I hear my mother's voice. And then, not always, sometimes I'm there, and refrain. Or if you have a beloved, it's almost that their voice becomes part of you, and when you're in a place, you hear how they would respond to that thing. That's also one of the important reasons that all spiritual paths really prioritize having a spiritual master, a spiritual teacher. You spend time with them, their voice becomes your internal voice. You know what they would say and do in that situation. That's how you behave. And that's why, one of the reasons why in our tradition, the Sufis say, "Ilmu fi sudur wa laysa fi sudur." Knowledge is in hearts, it's not in books. It's passed from heart to heart. It's an initiatic way. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. I just want to thank you for your reflection, because I actually moved to Turkey and my family lived there. So you said, oh, you go back to your parents. So it's the first time I've been with my family in 20-something years. So it's just really, I was like, oh, okay. Thank you. And my original awakening, the fear of being perceived as crazy and losing your mind was why the retraction and contraction happened. It was like, people are like, what's wrong with you? Why are you so happy? What's got into you? So I'm seeing now where that contraction is deep, deep gratitude. Thank you.
What is Rumi, the popular version? I'm drunk and you're insane. How will we ever get home? And the Prophet said, worship Allah until people call you crazy. So you're with people that we'll all be called crazy together.
Cheers to that. Sure.
Anybody else have any questions, comments, reflections? Yes. Wow, what a beautiful question. If some didn't hear, she mentioned about the symbolism of the full moon and how it affects spirituality, meditation. The moon, of course, does not generate its own light, but it receives light. And because of that, it becomes itself luminous and light-giving. And not only is it illuminated itself, but it illuminates the whole earth when we have a full moon. And for those of us modern people, we don't realize it as much because we're used to artificial light, but if you've ever spent time in places without artificial light, you realize how much of an impact the full moon makes. It's almost like the sun being out versus when the moon has waned, as far as making your way in the dark. And so the full moon represents the great ones who have removed whatever veils the heart from reflecting the divine light and the divine names and attributes. and have become themselves light, illuminated and light-giving. Illuminated and light-giving. And these are the prophets and the saints and sages, the true inheritors. And for this reason, of course, in the Islamic tradition, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi is usually associated with the full moon, Qamarun. And you will see even that I've been in the Muslim world where there's a full moon and people look up and just say sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That whenever they see the moon, they associate it with the Prophet, the Holy Prophet, because they witness it as a symbol of him and his reflectivity of the divine light. So, yeah, this is a beautiful question, and may we be those who receive the light and are light-giving to those around us.
If one wanted to bring muraba into their lives, after practicing it here for some people here maybe the first time, and if they want to continue to do it, how would you suggest they bring that about? What would be the sort of basic steps to practicing muraba?
So there are a number of ways, but one basic framework that's helpful for anyone who would like to establish this practice in their lives is to try to have a time when there are few distractions and a place where there are few distractions, if possible. It's not necessary, but it's ideal, especially in the beginning. And then to sit in that place and to face the Qibla, face the Holy Kaaba, so that we're oriented. And again, this is not completely necessary. Sometimes we're in places where we can't, or we're in rooms, gatherings like this where we're all facing different directions. But if one was alone, for instance, and could, this is a good practice. And then to sit in a comfortable place and to begin with the Fatiha, and then begin with some dhikr. It could be salawat on the Prophet, it could be la ilaha illallah, no God but God. We did the basmala, bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It could be istighfar, any formula of dhikr. And that helps you to drop into it, and to just the resonance of the invocation really kind of brings you into the state that prepares the heart. And then the essence of Murāqaba is really bringing one's awareness to the divine presence that is always with us and that never leaves us. And to take Rumi's advice, striving to, without judgment or harshness or getting too frustrated with ourselves, whenever we find our mind wandering, just to bring our attention back to the heart. And to understand that this divine presence is transformative, it's illuminating, it's purifying, it's polishing. And each second, each moment that we orient our heart towards it, there's a transformative effect that it has upon us. In fact, all of the acts of worship, the prayer and the fasting and all of it, is really to attain presence. And establish the prayer for my remembrance in the Quran. And fasting has been prescribed on you as it was prescribed on those before you, in order that you would attain taqwa, God consciousness, again, presence. So all of it is about that. And setting a time that is manageable is good. 5 minutes is good because we can all spare 5 minutes. It's not too daunting. And then if you were to exceed that, that's also good. There are certain apps like the one you have, Insight Timer, which is better than just setting an alarmer that like beeps with the not so attractive noise, because it sounds like a beautiful, subtle noise. And so once you go past 5, you can continue on if you have the time and energy in that particular day. And then again, I would just say that Murāqaba this practice, the goal is to be in this state perpetually, as Rumi said, right? To become water. And so to try to take this practice into our relationships, into our day-to-day dealings, into our workspace, while we're driving or on the train or whatever it is that we're doing, to try to bring that presence. That's the goal, is that it kind of feeds into our every state. But of course, all of the world's wisdom traditions recognize that there has to be some kind of practice where we take ourselves out of the hustle and bustle to develop the ability to be in the hustle and bustle and still attain that presence. So I find the morning is good for Murāqaba, if we can spare the time, but any time is fine. And then closing with the Fatiha is also beautiful. Of course, we have these Murāqaba retreats for anyone who's interested in a more deep dive. And I find that the retreats are really beautiful in the sense of, if you do this for a week in community, it really helps root the experience in a way that allows you to carry it forth. Like the group that just did Murāqaba retreat about a month ago, we all have a WhatsApp group and everyone's sharing their Murāqaba they did this day. 5 minutes here, so 10 minutes here. So it's beautiful to have community in that. And I know also this fall we plan to do like an online Murāqaba weekend intensive for people around the world that want to gather and can't travel. So that'll be, probably October, although we haven't set the exact dates, probably the second half of October. And we're also, it's not finalized, but we're planning to do our next Murāqaba retreat, God willing, will be for New Year's Murāqaba. So you're all invited, and we'll share details forthcoming.
So, as somebody who struggles with